Podcast.com. It's time for a podcast. Hello and welcome to In the Pocket, the bass guitar podcast, where we get the lowdown on the low end. My name's Jonny, a totally average bass player, and today it's just me. It's just your boy. I'm here to tell you all about bass stuff. Wow, that was a really good intro. You know what? I'm scrambling on my phone right now to find my notes to press record before finding anything. It's been that kind of week, you know. Ha ha ha. And yeah, so that intro was nearly great, but very quickly went downhill. And that's where we're going to go from here. Because, my goodness, is it hot. In the UK right now, it's about 33 degrees. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot. It's so hot. It is sweatier than something very moist. So yeah, I'm not gonna be talking for too long on this podcast just because it is so hot and this room is so hot. So it might be a bit of a short one this time, but you know me, probably not. Anyway, let's jump into our first question. First question comes from Louis Vulgord. I'm just going to go with that. On Instagram. Thank you so much for the question. If you want to submit your questions, by the way, just head over to my Instagram story where you'll be able to see me put up the poll on there and you can submit your questions just like Louis has done here. First question is, what's the best speaker size for cabs? 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, 15-inch, even 18? Are you mad? 18? Please. Can you get 18? I mean, of course you can get 18-inch speakers, but for bass, obviously the main ones that we're playing with normally are 10 and 15. You know, when you get speaker cabinet, most of the time you're getting either a 210 or a 410, 810, classic Ampeg 8x10, or 1x15, so it's one massive speaker. So if my belief is to be correct, then 10-inch speakers give you a bit more of a brighter sound and, you know, bigger, massive. That was my chair, by the way, if you can hear that. And then the bigger speakers give you that big rumble. And so 15-inch speakers paired up with 10-inch speakers is a dream come true. You know, it's the best of both worlds, and it just sounds wonderful. That is, for a long time, was my kind of dream setup. I remember the first like proper amp I played through. It was my mate Jake. And it was an Ashdown ABM rig, and it was I think it was the two. I can't remember if he had a 2x10 or 4x10. Might have been a 2x10 through a 1x15 with the matching Evo 3 head. And oh man, I was in love with that when I played it live, and even so much so that I went out and bought my own, and then the 410 cab, so I didn't have to have two. Because that's the other thing. Having two cabs is a pain in the bum, and I cannot be dealing with that anymore. I've had that before, and who wants that? Like, who wants to lug around even more stuff for arguably not that much benefit? I mean, ultimately, I think it sounds really good, but I don't know. I'm not going to go out and and do that ever again. I don't think those days are done. So I've not actually had any experience with 8-inch. But I bloody have with a 6-inch or 18-inch speakers. 18, I can't imagine being that nice. And the same with 8s. You're kind of getting the extremes of both ends there. Maybe combined, they sound good together, but I don't know. I've not really had. It's not a common thing anyway. So for me, overall it's got to go to 10-inch speakers just because they're the most common and they're just a safe bet, I think. I wouldn't want to have just a 1x15. I would choose to have a 210 or a 410 over a 1x15. However, my actual answer is going to go to 12. That kind of sweet spot in between 10 and 15. I've just got, if you follow me on Instagram, you already know this, I've just got a Laney Dibble rig. They came out last year and I've really wanted one, but not really been gigging too much, so I haven't really had an excuse to sell my Fender rig and get one of those because it just couldn't justify it. But I've now joined a new band that's going to be gigging more, and I'm like, well, I might as well. So I picked up the Dibble 500 head and then later on the matching 2x12 cab. I'd heard great things about it. The two speakers are stacked on top of each other, so it's roughly the same height as a 4x10. Because that's the only thing about 2x10s I don't like, is that they're so close to the ground, and I kind of want the sound to be blasting up at me, not just at my feet. Arguably, that's what a monitor is on stage, but I don't know. I quite like it being at a level where I can feel it, the air being pushed at my body as well as my feet. Anyway, and I love this cab. It sounds phenomenal. I really like it, and it does kind of get the best of both. It's super punchy. Of course, a lot of this is down to the head as well, but yeah, go and try some 12-inch speakers. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. So at the minute, for my best speaker size, it's going to be 12, closely followed by a 10-inch, I think. Let's move on to the next question. It is time for the news. I love news. I love seeing new stuff that's going on in the bass world in our globe. And I'm sad to see that it's a bit of a quiet week, this week for news. But there are some pretty cool things. So talking about cabs and what speaker cabinets are best, if you're on the hunt for new cabs, this might have come in just the right time, because Trace Elliot have introduced their Pro Series 4x10 and 2x12 cabinets. So they're saying it's offering thunderous lows and crisp, intelligent highs. I like that. Intelligent highs. Good descriptor. I can just kind of hear that now. It's funny actually with Trace Elliot, because somebody asked me the other day, like, oh, would you review some Trace Elliot stuff? What's your opinion on them? And I haven't really encountered Trace Elliot for years. I know they're made in the UK, but yeah, I haven't seen anything from them for a long time. That's a lie. I've seen some of their small heads, but I only ever used them when I was 14 or 15, when I'd borrowed an amp for a gig, or used someone's backline as this massive Trace Elliot stack, and I was like, whoa, it's so cool. It's so black and green. But yeah, apart from that, I hadn't really gotten stuck in with that brand. So both of these Pro Series cabs from Trace Elliot can handle can handle 1,000 watts at 8 ohms. That's a lot of wattage. I've never played anything over 800 watts, I think. It's interesting, isn't it, how much wattage they think you're going to need. Because that is that's a lot of power capability. And these cabs are, oh boy, they ain't cheap. They're coming in at around $1,600. So pretty high-end bits of gear. But they have got casters, which is a godsend. And it looks like the casters are actually on the back. So I'm looking at the 212 right now. The casters are on the back of it, not underneath. So you tip it on its upside down. Not upside down. You put it on its back to wheel it around. So I think that's a pretty good feature. The only thing I don't like about my new 212 is that it doesn't have any wheels at all, which I've kind of gotten lazy with my old rig, because it had casters, wheel it around everywhere, easy peasy. This one, not so much, but it's for the tone. So both of these cabs are expected in November 15th, 2022. So yeah, new cabs and Trace Elliot. I'd love to back into Trace Elliot and see what's happening with them, because I've not tried one of their amps in years. Moving on to from one amp manufacturer to another, and that is Orange. Now, Orange amps I absolutely love. I think they sound great, particularly good for like pick driven, huge sounded tones, lots of distortion. They soak it up really well. One of my favorite heads used to be the AD200. Oh, that tube amp sounds phenomenal. Anyway, now Orange have stepped into the world of making instruments. They did it a couple of years, well, I say a couple of years ago, I think it was like 2015 that they launched the O bass, obviously like the Orange bass, and these were, I mean, they claim that like, oh yes, they went down a storm and they were like the best and they're, you know, amazing, such great character. Did they? I thought they were a bit of a flop and people were like, these are disgusting. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might remember them. They released an orange version and a black version, Les Paul style bodies, with just a single P-bass pickup and a weird shaped pickguard. And yeah, I think they look awful. I always thought they looked really bad. The pickguard's a really weird shape. It's like they're close to looking good. It's so close, but they don't quite hit the mark. And it's weird because the Gretsch Electromatic Junior Jet looks amazing with like a Les Paul bass body. I think like guitars and SGs, Les Pauls and SGs look amazing as guitars, but not as basses. And I think the only way the Gretsch looks good is because it's a short scale. So it's actually closer to, you know, I guess looking more like a guitar. So I think that's why. So yeah, Les Paul style full scale basses, which is what these O basses are, don't quite do it for me. Now, they claim that, you know, they've got enhanced features and it's back, baby, but even better. But from looking at them, it looks like they say they've improved the balance by changing the wood to be a heavier wood, so the body's heavier, so there's not so much neck dive. It's got a binding now around it. And just like small little tweaks, and I don't know, they don't look that exciting to me. What I think is cool is that they have launched them in two colors again, just the orange and the black. But when you buy one, apparently you get different pick guards with it. I think more companies should do this. You know, I'm a sucker, absolute sucker for changing out a pick guard, and it can transform a bass and breathe some new life into it. So I think it's cool that it comes with different ones. And on the black one, I kind of always said, if they did it with a black pick guard to hide the horrible pick guard shape, then that would be pretty cool. But they've released it with a tortoiseshell one. So black and tortoiseshell I can get on board with. I like that look. And it's getting there. Like, it makes it look better, but it's still not great. And I've seen Patrick Hunter's video on it. AMP, the bass player, Andrew's video on it was hilarious because he got one, and they were quite different videos, different reviews, because one was like, this is a total sleeper, this is amazing, and then the other one was like, no, this is really bad. And I honestly don't, from videos, I don't love the sound of them. I think it's a bit, it doesn't have that full warmth to a P-bass. I don't feel like it feels a bit scratchy and grainy to me. You think it would be a bit warmer because the pickup is slightly closer to the neck than a traditional P-bass. But yeah, I don't know. They also scream that they are like, oh, so diverse and like versatile. And it's like, and Andrew in his video demonstrated this perfectly by just saying that, like, yeah, it can be versatile as a P-bass is, because it suits so many genres and does them all really well. But you can't claim that your bass is like versatile really when it's only got one sound or one tone knob, you know, to go on and off. I just don't think that you can really say that. So yeah, I thought that the copy that they wrote for the marketing of this bass was pretty funny. Like, every line in it, I was like, really? So yeah, a bit weird one from Orange there. But hey, you know, maybe they'll be really successful and maybe they're really nice. Who knows?
looking at, I'm trying to find a price on these. I think they're around $600-700. And looking at online, I just found a video of the Sunburst one. If that didn't have a pick guard, it would look incredible. So yeah, not too sure what the thought process here is, but I'd love to be proved wrong about these, because I could see myself starting to like them, but it's the want is just not there right now at all. So maybe next time, RNJ, try again. Let's see some more. I'm all for amp companies making guitars, because they're all, they know the fundamentals of the electronics and how to get a good sound, so why not? Power to them. But yeah, maybe not this one. Let's move on to the next question.
This next question comes from Bert Allen Peter on Instagram. Thank you so much for your question. And this says, how to start a home studio. You might have seen on my YouTube channel, I released a video a couple of months ago of my updated studio space. And it has changed a bit since then, again, with some more stuff actually on the walls, making it feel a bit more homely, etc. And yeah, it's a question that I get quite a lot, is about what's the setup like? How are you recording things for videos and just for music in general? So for me, I'm a cheapskate. I don't think that you need to have that much of an expensive setup to do great things and to sound good or have decent or a level that you're happy with. If you go into it thinking, I've got to spend thousands of pounds on an interface and get the most insane speakers, no, you don't need to. You've got to get what works for you. And if your budget asks for a certain amount, then you're going to be happy at a certain amount. I don't think that money is the answer. Anyway, so my interface that I use is actually one of the cheapest or most famous, I suppose, not most famous, most popular is the word I'm looking for, interfaces on the market. And that is the the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. Just 2 inputs, simple controls, can phantom power microphones. It is perfect for what I do. I don't need loads of inputs. I don't think I've ever needed more than 2 because of the nature of how I record things. I'm not recording loads of things at once. I might record a microphone and an input from a guitar at once, 2 at the same time, but never am I recording a big band or loads of microphones on a drum kit or something. So I don't need that extension of all those inputs. So that's something you got to think about. What is the interface going to look like? Is it going to function for your needs? I really like the Focusrite. I've had 0 issues and 0 want to upgrade it, if I'm honest. I had a couple of comments that were like, using a Scarlett 2i2, oh my god, amateur. It's like, well, it doesn't, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And I think it does a great job. I can control the output to my speakers really easy, the output to headphones really easy. It is perfect for what I do. So think about how many inputs you need and what kind of setup you want, really, or what you want to be able to record. So I've kind of started in the middle of the chain, or where it is, because the Focusrite is, of course, powering some speakers. Or not powering, it is just sending the music to some active speakers that are powered from the wall. These speakers are Rocket 5, the KRKs, the ones with the yellow speakers that you see, really, really common. And again, no problems at all. They go loud enough for what I want. They're pretty good for bass. Most of the time I'm working with headphones. I've got neighbors. I cannot be blasting my bass all night long, even though I'd really love to do that. And so in terms of volume, I don't need masses. And that's one other thing you've got to think about. Are you going to need huge volume? Are you going to need to have to blast it, or can you just get away with a smaller setup? For me, these are absolutely fine. I've never really been tempted to upgrade them, and all of that came in a package together, so it was a bit discounted, so that was really good. Other thing is then the computer, the operating system that you're using, and the tools that you're recording into. These are kind of the main menu items that you need for a recording setup. So for me, I'm an Apple guy for computers. Phones a little bit. I've got Samsung at the minute, but I think I'm going to go back to Apple after like 5 years away from Apple phones. Anyway, different topic. With Apple, I just think they're the most easy to use for creatives and come with the best programs. Like Logic is my best friend. I absolutely love Logic. It's my program of choice. I think it's so nice to look at, much more so than things like Pro Tools. And there's nothing wrong with Pro Tools, but I've never really gotten into it. I've always stuck with Logic, and everything, all the tools that I need, if any plugins, then it all works for Logic. And that's great. So I really like that. The other thing as well is what you might want to get is a little keyboard, a little MIDI keyboard. I've got this really cheap one that's only like 2 octaves worth. It's perfect, ideal for what I do. I mostly, if I'm honest, track drums using it, MIDI drums, and using a plugin. But I will literally tap the drums in based on what they're tracked to on the keys, and then go and quantize it after and make sure it's in the right time. So yeah, a little insight there. So I'm tapping away madly on my keyboard. From there, this is a difficult question, really. From there, I go to plugins. Okay, so I actually don't use many plugins. My main one I'm using is for drums. I use the Nolly Get Good drums. I think is it the Modern and Massive ones I've got? I can't remember. I bought them once and I've never looked back. Awesome plugins. Plugins really depends as well. There are a plethora of plugins you can get out there. The SansAmp one, the Ampeg one, and then of course Neural DSP, looking for guitar stuff and for bass as well with the Dark Glass suite. Awesome sounding plugins. So I would recommend checking that out as well. It's really got to think about, okay, what kind of genre am I recording? What do I want to sound like? And how am I going to sound like that? What tools do I need to achieve that? For me, I don't really have many plugins, but I do use the Line 6 HX Stomp. So effectively, all of my plugins for sounds and software of instruments comes first in my chain. I plug my bass or guitar into the HX Stomp, then that sends to the interface, then the interface goes into the speakers. Now, of course, I could, if I wanted to. The HX Stomp has a left and right out. I could just use the HX Stomp as the interface, but that removes the possibility of removing it, and the inputs becomes a bit awkward because it doesn't have a DI in, and that's what I use an XLR in, and that's what I use for the microphone, etc. So it's easier for me to do it this way. And I really like it. I really like this setup that I've got at the minute. It's easy to use, it's functional, and it works for me. And I think that is the most important thing to take away, because, how to start a home studio is an open-ended question, really, because there's no written way. I would just say build up slowly and get the essentials first. So you're going to need the computer, the operating system, and the program that you want. From there, maybe get the interface, because then you can go guitar straight in there. You could go headphones into the interface, and then you're good to go. You could just record everything and some plugins, those just a couple of items, and you have a home studio. You can do what you want. You don't need to spend massive amount of money. The other thing that's important in a studio, I think, is having a room that sounds good. If you're going to be blasting the music, you want it to be treated well. Now, I'll hold my hands up. I have not got a clue how to treat a room. I'm quite fortunate that every room I've gone into has been pretty well soundproofed, or the acoustics in there are fine. I've now built up loads of stuff in the room, so there's no echoes or anything like that. It's pretty damp sounding, I think. So yeah, I'm fine with that. So think about that as well, because that can actually really affect how you're hearing the sounds of your studio space, especially with speakers as well. Get some stands for your speakers eventually as well. Raise them up to ear level, because that's where you want them to be. And I do that by putting them on a load of pop figures. I haven't got any stands, but I did have a load of pop figures left over, and it just so happened it looked pretty cool. It can take the weight, and it meant that they had somewhere to go. So I put them to good use. So yeah, I really like that little feature. And so yeah, I have no clue if that answered the question, but I hope it helped by giving some insight into my setup and thought process, and help you prioritize the little bits and pieces that you might need to build your own home studio. I always think studio is a loose term for my room, but there we go. Thank you so much for your question. Let's move on to the next segment. Okay, this next segment is my favorite segment, and it is That Tone You Own. So each week I or my guests bring along a tone that they consider to be their own. This week I've already done my own tone, so when it's an episode with just me, I like to bring along a tone that I'm enjoying at the minute, or just one that I'm messing around with, because that's all I do with my time apparently. So this week, exclusive look into a new video that will be coming out in the future, and it's on a preamp, my first ever preamp video. OMG, can you believe I'm basically low-end lobster now? So this comes from UK preamp and pedal provider. Is that the right word? I just wanted the alliteration with pedal, I think. Lucid Hand. Manufactured down in London. Really awesome for them to send me some of their gear. I've got the compressor that they just released, and also this the NFP preamp. Now this preamp is a bit different to your normal preamp. This one is a filter based preamp instead of like an EQ. So instead of having a bass or a middle or treble control, you can just filter on different parts of the bass. So I've got this one hooked up to the 2 pickups, so it will filter each pickup, and I'll show you what I mean by that now. What I've done is I have modded the Squier Contemporary Series PH, so the 5-string that I've got, and so taken out the normal guts and put in this Lucid Hand preamp, and I'm pretty stoked about this, to be honest. I think it's pretty cool. So at the minute, this is just what it's like. Everything on full, filters up, and just in the middle position. So yeah, sounds pretty cool. And what this preamp allows you to do is filter out each of the pickups. So I'm going to head over to just the P-bass pickup a minute, and on one of the knobs here now I have got a control for the P-bass pickup. So let's see what happens as I roll off the tone of that. So it's just like rolling off the tone on your bass, but doing it per pickup. And I think that's great. It's a bit like having a stacked jazz bass setup where you can roll off the tone on each pickup independently and get some even more variation. And so this is the interesting thing. I've rolled that off on the P-bass pickup. I mean, let's put it halfway. I love that. It's almost like a mode. Let's play with fingers a minute. I think it really allows that pickup to sing way more than it was with that preamp that was in there before. It sounded a bit cheap, I think, or like I was just going for the gnarliest sound possible.
But like rolling it off, it makes it feel more balanced, more like a P bass. Anyway, let's roll it all the way off. And now let's blend in using the pickup selector. Let's blend in the control from going into the bridge pickup. So it just sounds more full. Let's take away, that P bass pickup now. Just have it on the bridge. It's just got this extra warmth underneath it and big while still having that presence. I just think it's really cool. So let's swap them around now. Let's go, okay, all onto the bridge pickup. Let's wind that off. 50%. That is so much fun to play with. So P bass pickup is, let's blend the two together, see what we get. You just get a slightly less fully raspy sound. I say fully, it's less rasp and more full. I think it just adds this layer of sub underneath, which is just super well suited to this bass, especially as a 5-string. I think it sounds really cool, and I'm so glad that I did it on this preamp, or on this bass, sorry, because I think it kind of needed that. So yeah, super happy. For funsies, let's have all of them off, both pickups. 50%. It's got way less of an aggressive sound to what it used to have, and I think it really suits it. It makes it sound less cheap, more mellow, but at the same time, just more clarity in those notes as well. I really enjoy playing this bass a lot more now. So thank you so much to Lucid Hand for sending me this preamp. There will be a video on it soon, but I was kind of excited about it, so I wanted to show you now. Let's move on to our next question. This next question forms the big bass debate. It's where I like to take a question and talk about it a little more, for it to be the title of this episode. And this question for the big bass debate comes from Chad on Instagram, who asks, how did you find your sound? Now, I think this is something that's incredibly important when playing any instrument, to be honest. I don't know how, I say any instrument, I don't know how really that applies to other instruments that aren't guitars and drums, but I guess it does. And we'll dive into that a bit more later on, I suppose. There's two ways of approaching your sound. I think you need to look at it from a gear perspective and tone, and then also your playing style. I think my playing style naturally came from having cheap gear and wanting to achieve a certain sound, this aggressive tone that was punchy and clangy, but not having necessarily the expensive gear to achieve that. And so I kind of developed this percussive kind of aggressive playing style that contributed to my sound. So I think the two kind of mesh together when it comes to my sound. Obviously, there are things that I do to my tone now to get it how I want it to sound. But I think starting out, that's how I kind of gained those fundamentals. That's why I think also it's having expensive gear isn't the be all and end all. Like, you can get a lot of sound from your fingers, and you don't need to spend ridiculous amounts of money to get that. It's something that I've said on this podcast and on this channel loads before, but I'll take that to my grave. I just think it's so true, because you give somebody, a beginner, £1,000 guitar, okay, and they're gonna find it easier to play on, and then kind of have that leg up almost. Whereas if you've had to kind of battle through some more challenging instruments, then you're probably going to develop a better skill. So then when you go on to a better instrument eventually, where it's easier to play, you're going to be even better. I think that it can be quite formative, those years when you're playing more affordable instruments, kind of working out as you go. And, take that with a pinch of salt, because sometimes, it can go the other way, and the instrument can be so detrimental to your playing that it doesn't enhance it and actually makes it a lot more difficult. You kind of need to meet that balance, and that can be hard, especially when just watching videos online. You kind of got to try for yourself in that regard. Anyway, so yeah, my friend perfectly did an example of this, where he used to learn solos and learn stuff on his acoustic before then learning it on his electric. And he said that the higher action and the fretting style on his acoustic meant that he strengthened his fingers so much, and he mastered it on there, and it meant that when he went onto his electric, he was even better at it. And I thought, that's an interesting way to overcome a hurdle, to kind of make it more difficult for yourself, so that when you go to do it, I don't know, I feel like there's a lesson in there somewhere, and I kind of took away from that and have applied it to my playing as well. So I think there's a lot of tone in your hands, and that you need to kind of figure that bit out along the way. And honestly, I think I did that not only through gear, but also because I didn't really learn any songs. I think that has hindered me a bit in my bass playing journey. But I'm not much of a song guy. Like, if someone was like, "Oh, play this classic bass song," I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know." I'm not a very traditional musician in that regard. I'm more of a writing musician. I like writing my own stuff. I like sitting down in my little studio and recording sounds, and things like that. Not like going and playing this whole song, which seems a bit strange, but I don't know. It's just how I was kind of brought up into it. And being in a band, in a room and writing, that's just always been my kind of style when working with other musicians as well. So I think a lot of it comes from that as well. And so I've had influences along the way. And people always ask me all the time, who influences you? Who's your influence? And honestly, it was just the bands that I liked at the time, and that I really picked up and related to the bass lines, where I kind of noticed them and took note, but I was rarely learning from traditional means and being like, oh yes, I need to learn this bass line from this bass player, and this bass player is a legend, and all of the, I didn't learn like that when I was younger. So I've not really taken that forward with me. So I don't really have this back catalogue of inspirational players that I draw from and that had an influence on my sound. I just knew how I wanted to sound, and then developed my sound around that and my technique. And it does mean that I've been pretty slow to some things before. Like I said, it's not a guaranteed good method, I don't think. But it's just kind of a bit of an insight into how I was brought up playing bass, and then how that's led to my sound, because it's quite naturally, if I pick up a bass and just start playing, it's quite aggressive with a pick, clangy, naturally. I go for a mid scoopy sound, which I'm slowly edging away from or experimenting with others. But yeah, that's just the tone that I've always kind of gravitated towards naturally. But then on the other side, I think there are ways for other people to find their sounds, following musicians you like, looking up the gear that they use. Is there a certain effect that you really like? I'm actually really starting to like reverb on bass. I always thought it was pointless. I thought because I've always been a rock and metal guy, I was like, why on earth would anybody ever want that? I want a preamp, I want distortion, I want a compressor. Those are my top pedals or effects that I'd use. So now I'm getting into more modulation effects and echoey effects, like delay and reverb, and then you start to hear songs that have got that on it, and it starts to draw on your influence. So I think once you find your sound, you can then experiment from there and apply these effects to your sound to further develop it. Some people are well known for using a wah or a certain fuzz, they're known for. And I think that's cool, but it's just about finding what works for you and what is right for your sound. If you're just playing covers all the time in a covers band, I feel like you're only really ever going to pick up other people's sound and not really develop your own. And I've met several people in covers bands. Some people say that, like, oh no, you have to get that song exactly how it is. And then some people are like, no, like, you don't have to do that at all. You can play around with it a little bit, as long as it doesn't distract totally from the song and make it unrecognizable. You can play around and add your own kind of flair to it, and that's kind of more fun. And I think that's the camp that I kind of lie in a bit more. So I think that if you are just doing covers at the minute, or you're just starting out, then I think branch out, try and play with other musicians, or, just try writing, try picking up the guitar without any plan ahead or practice, and just go from there. Or even just get a drum machine and play along to that, see what naturally comes out, and you start discovering where naturally your hands start to take you on the fretboard and what sound you start to develop. And I think that can really impact your technique. So not really sure if this question was about advice or just wanting to learn about my how I found my sound, but hey, there's a bit of both in there. So that brings us to the end of a podcast. Thank you so much for everyone that submitted their questions. If you want to do the same, head over to my Instagram at Jonny Dibble, and look out for the polls on my stories that I put up on there, because that's how you can get in touch and submit your questions to. And if I like them enough, then I'll answer them on here. I do have a backlog of questions, by the way, so if yours doesn't get answered, I didn't just throw it in the flames, get rid of it, straight in the bin. No, I've got a back catalogue of questions should I want to kind of dive in or think one is particularly appropriate for a certain guest that we have on, or a bit of news or whatever. So fear not if I don't answer your question. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for listening. See you next time.